Okay, I think now I'm set. We can start. So sorry about the delay, guys. I think the moderator can take over, and then from there we can officially start.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. So, good evening, everyone. A warm welcome to Cracking First Year End of Year Exams. This is part of the Mastermind Exam Mentorship Series 1.0, brought to you by Mastermind Medic Solutions. My name is Valerie Kendi, a first year MBCHB student, and I'll be your moderator tonight. So quick housekeeping before we begin. Please keep your mics muted unless called upon. Drop your questions in the chat at any time. I'll pick them up during the question and answer. And remember, the session is being recorded to be shared afterwards. So before I introduce our speaker, one thing to note, tonight is not a lecture. We're not here to reteach you anatomy or physiology or any other unit. This is about how to actually approach first year, how to study smart, cope with the pressure, and walk into your exams ready. Real, practical, been the advice. Yeah. So now to our speaker, Andrew Odhiambo holds a first class BSc in anatomy with honors and has walked the exact path that you're on now. So he has helped past students find their footing, and tonight he's sharing what actually works. So please welcome Andrew. Andrew, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Valerie. Good evening, guys. Sorry for the delay. I was facing a bit of technical challenges before we started, but I think now we can start. So my name is Andrew Odhiambo, fourth year medical student, the anatomist, and it is my absolute pleasure to be taking you through some tips, more or less tips and guidance of how I went through first year. And I think they can be projected to the rest of the years, they can apply throughout. And these are some of the things that work for me personally, as well as my friends. So I'm looking forward to interacting with you guys. Feel free to ask any questions in case you're stuck or you need any sort of guidance on further into anything that you may have missed. And I hope it is helpful to you guys. Yeah, so thank you guys.
Sorry to interrupt you, Andrew, but your audio is not clear enough.
Okay, and what about now?
Can you talk so that I can see if it's clear?
I think I have been talking. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, I think I am in a bit of a crowd at the moment. We went home and I'm at some family function, so I'm really trying to keep the audio to a minimal, avoid disturbance and the rest. So in case you don't hear me, guys, just please reach out so that I can repeat whatever it is that you haven't heard. So I think from now we are set to go. So maybe just I introduce myself one more time. I'm Andrew Odhiambo, a fourth year medical student, BSc anatomist, and it's a pleasure for me to take you through some tips for preparations in your first end of years. I hope it helps. So, Valerie, can we just get straight into it?
Okay. So from the questions that I got, people are asking how to adequately revise for end of years, and are end of years any different from the cards in terms of difficulties?
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. I'm just going to take you through a brief presentation that I happen to prepare regards to preparations for your end of years. And then all those questions that you have, will be able to answer them at the very end. So you can just keep the questions coming in the meantime. So if Valerie, I think you want me to share my screen, then I think you can be able to see my presentation, and then I'll just take you through it, and you can have a Q&A session at the end.
Yeah, I've allowed you to share your screen, Andrew.
Again, I'm trying to share my screen, but it says host has disabled participant video screen sharing.
Can you try again?
So I hope you guys can see my screen. The title is preparing for end of year examinations. And I really hope you can hear me as well. So I start. Can I be heard?
Yeah, you can be heard.
Okay. So preparing for end of year examinations. So this is just advice from someone who has already been there. And ideally this is because from myself as well as your teachers and your mentors and your peers, you can actually do this because you already came into this place. So the believe is that you can make. So I do believe in you guys. Most of the time as I'm demonstrating, I usually tell my mentees or my table mentees or my students, can do this, join my genius. So I do believe the same. So it's well worth that you also believe in yourself as well.
Andrew,
Yes,
someone has raised a problem that they can't hear you clearly.
just give me a moment. Give me like 2 minutes. I'm trying to sort out this audio issue. I don't seem to understand what's going on.
Okay.
Okay. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, I think the audio is more clear.
Okay. Let me just get back to it already. Okay. So in case you lose me, guys, please feel free to. So okay. So you already made it this far, guys, and getting into medical school is an achievement by virtue, but staying here actually takes consistency, resilience, and the willingness to keep learning. So for you guys, particularly your anatomy, your physiology, your biochemistry, your behavioral sciences, all at once, it's a lot. And trust you me, it doesn't get any easier, but it doesn't mean that it actually gets harder. That just depends on who you are as a person and what you actually are willing to take out of this at the very end. So I know it's a lot, but it can actually be done considering you have doctors graduating each and every year. So the three most important things ideally for you guys is consistency, resilience, and having a strategy. So for consistency, the fact that you guys have been showing up every day, going to the labs for your anatomy, your physiology labs, your biochem labs, attending all your lectures, sorry, be it physical or online, that at least covers up for something. Like you have been consistent throughout. Sorry. For resilience, you guys, I do know sometimes, particularly for anatomy, especially when I demo you guys, I've interacted with some of you guys, and I have actually gotten the feedback from you guys that you guys try and read. It's a lot. You try and read again. It's too much. So the fact that you keep on reading, and we advise you guys to keep on reading, especially as you're preparing for your end of years, that is also something that counts for. And I think for some of the guys who I have interacted with, especially the ones who come to school on Saturdays, big ups you guys. Some of us actually never used to do that, but the fact that you can actually come to school on a Saturday, that just goes to show how much you're willing to sacrifice for this, and the resilience that comes out of that at the very end just has to pay. For strategy, then this is just not a matter of reading hard. You can't just say you want to stuff the whole Gray's Anatomy or Ganong's or Gaiton's or Chandramouli's biochemistry. You want to shove it into your brain or read all the 12 modules of behavioral science. Then you expect it to just stick. So you can't just read hard. You also need to have a strategy of how you're reading and just try and consolidate all this into memory. So that just goes to show how much you guys are really putting into this. So the most important thing actually is to have a plan, not just good intentions. So as you can see on my screen here, it's just an image of like someone trying to read and just trying to force it into reading. So normally, even for myself, you can't just wait until you feel like studying. So that is one of the most difficult things to do. And that feeling actually rarely comes on its own. So you need to build a realistic timetable and stick to it. So in as much as you actually want to read by yourself, if you're not strictly adhering to something that guides you on how to read and what to read, you can't actually expect to just, okay, let me now just start reading. Because the question would be, what are you reading? For how long are you reading it? Is it something that you've already read before? Are you trying to consolidate that memory from class? So there are so many questions to ask revolving around just wanting to read. So you need to have a clear plan on how you're going to read. And for most of the instances, I'll be making reference to anatomy because with regards to it being my subject matter, I think it's one of the most challenging areas, particularly for first years. Bearing in mind that you guys also have physiology and biochemistry, which are not a walk in the park, as I think or rather say. So the most important thing is having a plan. So today you're going to be reading physiology, tomorrow you're going to be reading biochemistry, because remember you have 4 units at the same time and you really need to cover them. No unit is greater than the other and no one is lesser than the other. So I think it used to be, I can pay reference to something we used to learn in Kiswahili in high school where they used to say hakuna lugha bora kuliko nyingine. So you can't say that anatomy is higher than BChem or physiology is higher than behavioral science. All of them are given the same weight, and ideally, all of them count towards your end of year total marks. So you should ideally focus on all of them. So most of the times, for those who have interacted with me one-on-one, I usually ask you how many hours do you read a day, and ideally, I usually recommend at least 6 hours a day. So 4 to 6 hours, which are so sorry. So can you guys still hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So normally I usually recommend 4 to 6 hours a day. So being focused, and that doesn't mean just sitting through 6 hours, the whole of the 6 hours and reading at once. You also need to include breaks because ideally your brain needs to cooperate with your mind and your body and everything. So you can't just force your knowledge into being and just say you want to read for 6 hours. I want to read this biochemistry for 6 hours, or I want to read neuroanatomy for 6 hours. You need to take like consistent breaks so that you at least give your brain a chance to breathe. And then a schedule tells you what to study next so that you don't have to guess, so that you reduce that decision fatigue. And the decision fatigue is actually what makes it very difficult for your preparations because you end up accumulating more time or giving one unit more time than it actually requires while ignoring the rest. So at the end of the day, you end up not preparing particularly well for another unit at the expense of another. And that is one of the biggest mistakes that you can actually make for your end of years because you can't predict for sure what is going to actually come for your end of years. So have a plan. Give yourself a minimum of 6 hours per day. If you can go more, even better. With included breaks, that's fantastic. And if you have something that you stick by throughout each and every day, then that is the best decision you can actually make. So ideally, what I advise for most of the cases is starting with your weaknesses. So each and every one of you is different. We are not all the same. So for example, for myself, my strength is in anatomy. Another friend of mine has a strength in physiology. Another friend of mine has a strength in biochemistry. Another one is good at behavioral science. So these things just come easy to each and every one of us. So sorry about that. So ideally, you can't give your strengths the most amount of time in your timetable. You see, you need exams don't actually test your strengths, they expose your weaknesses. Actually, that's why you see umesoma sana a given unit and then inakuja, they repeated the questions, you went through past papers, umepita. Then there's this other unit like physiology or biochem, you didn't actually prepare really well, then it exposes you. So anatomy, maybe umepata 60, you have like 60, and then or 70 or 80, some will even go as far as 90s. And then your biochemistry or your physiology, you have like a solid 40. And then you see now that has exposed your weakness. So your weakness is actually physiology. So you can be reading like anatomy for 6 hours a day without trying to do something for physiology or biochem or even behavioral science. So focus on your weaknesses because they are the ones that will most likely limit your progression into the next year. Because remember, all four of them count. So if you have actually been getting like a consistent 50 throughout your cuts for all the units, that's much better than someone who gets like an 18 an art, a 17 physio, a 13 biochem, a 14 behavioral science. That's like a lot of inconsistency throughout, and that will actually lead to some very adverse effects, actually. So try and focus on your weaknesses. And the weaknesses isn't just per unit, it can also be per topic. So if neuroanatomy is confusing, spend more time there, not less. If it's in biochemistry, you can't understand that Henderson-Hasselbalch equation, or your metabolism, if it's fat metabolism or it's amino acid metabolism, put much more effort into that. But that doesn't mean that you leave out the rest of the topics or the rest of the subunits. It just means give it more time according to your timetable. That's how. Then revision, ideally, you should revise smart and not just hard. By hard, I mean just trying to accumulate a lot of time into revision. So reading notes repeatedly is one of the least effective ways to study. So your brain needs to retrieve information and not just recognize it. So you can use techniques like mind mapping, where you just try and sit down and recall as much as you possibly can from what you have already read. That's how. So draw from memory. If it's for anatomy, ideally, I think some of you have interacted with you, and you've also, some of you, I think, have interacted with Dr. Munguti, who is like, sketch anatomy diagrams as much as possible. So draw. If you're into group discussions, teach it out loud. I see for your tables, usually you assign each other objectives for anatomy. So teach each other. So if a given objective was particularly a strength of yours, teach it to others so that you consolidate it further into your memory. Don't just sit there with the knowledge that you have acquired. Maybe somebody else didn't read enough before the lab session. Practice your past papers. MCQs and past questions trains your brain to recall under pressure. And for practicing past papers, ideally, you don't just go through them because they will repeat them. You go through them just to see the scope or ideally how they set questions. So this helps you to further your revision, and it just ensures that uh, in case they repeat them, it's a win-win. In case they don't, at least you have a scope and have a more familiar way, recollection of what to expect. That's how. It can be a similar question, not just the same question, but it can be similar to what you went through the past paper. So it just helps you consolidate your memory even further. With each other, guys, study groups work best when you're actively testing one another. So hearing from someone else makes you recall it much, much better, especially if it's a peer. I know sometimes the lectures can be boring, and who am I to say all of us think the same thing? So hearing it from a peer will make it much, much better, and it's easier to remember. Sawa. So as you get, I am pretty sure at this point you already received your end of year timetables and you know which papers start first, which papers start last. So ideally, as I was preparing this, I used our my years, that is 2022 end of year timetable. And for that, what happened is that we had anatomy last, then physiology was second last, then biochemistry, and behavioral science was one of the first papers that we did. So that's what I used to draw this map out here. So ideally, what is advised or what I advised or what worked better for me was starting early with anatomy because it was the last paper. So read the last paper first, that is between these 2 weeks. Okay, now you're down to 1 week. So within this last week that you're left with, try and read what paper that will come last. So that is maybe say from tomorrow and Monday and Tuesday, be reading the last paper first. Then as you get closer to the first paper, so that is like from somewhere Friday, Saturday, Sunday, then I'll start reading your first exam. Because ideally, most of the times, if your first exam is anatomy, you'll end up reading a whole lot of anatomy, polishing the first exam for weeks, which I believe for the past week you guys have been coming to the lab more than frequently, even compared to what you are doing for your classes. And then you barely have time for the last one. So by the time your last paper comes, you're inadequately prepared and you know what to expect after that. That's how. So the smarter approach is you prepare for the later subjects well in advance. So make sure you read them thoroughly. And then as each exam approaches, you focus out the exam that is coming closer so that your memory is much, much fresher and you can be able to dispense what you have actually been reading. I hope that makes sense. So in case you can reverse the order depending on now what your actual final year end of examinations is coming. so that you're actually revising and not learning. Then the most important bit ideally is sleep. So sleep is a part of studying. So I'm just going to give you a quick story. So recently after your cut three for anatomy, I think some two of you guys wanted a remarking of the paper. So you went to your class coordinator's office. Then the class coordinator called me in. So as I was going to him, he was like, okay, this first years want a remarking of their papers. And I was like, no worries. It will take me at most 20 minutes to remark the papers if that is what they really want. And as they were looking at their marks, they were trying to sort of figure out what had actually happened because they were claiming they had prepared adequately. So as we were like doing a sort of inquisition with your class coordinator, then the truth actually came out. They actually hadn't prepared well. And the one thing that stood out for both of them is that both of them were transnighting the night before the exam. So you want to come to an exam, marathons, that is for anatomy, on 3 hours or 2 hours of sleep, and the bell triggers you. You get anxiety, you're not prepared, you're tired, your brain is not cooperating, and then things just start becoming extremely difficult for you. Sasa. So try as much as possible and sleep. If you've been reading for these 2 weeks, so the previous week and the next week, then by the time you're getting to your end of years, ideally, you shouldn't be transnighting. Sorry, is someone unmuted? All right, I think we can go on. So as you approach the exam, you don't want to be transnighting that you've been reading the whole night going for your end of years. You'll actually end up dozing in the middle of the exam. I remember for our first year exams, I think for biochemistry, someone had transnighted and then during the exam they actually collapsed and fainted. Then the exam had to be hauled off. And it was a very difficult thing to actually go through because now you have to start preparing for your specials. And it's a whole bunch of preventable scenarios. So as you've been preparing for these past 2 weeks and ideally the whole of the year, I do trust you've been attending your classes, your labs, your lectures, and your demonstration sessions. So during the exam period, ideally, as much as possible and get at least 6 hours of sleep. So 7 to 8, okay, but at least 6 hours of sleep is just recommended. So your brain will actually appreciate that much better for your exams. Because if you want to go through transnighting and you're actually a person of a faint heart, then trust you me, it's going to be actually very disastrous. Sawa. Then this is the most important slide, I think, according to me. Don't compare yourself and trust your prep. So some people finish reading early, others are still struggling a week before exams. Some are quiet, others discuss everything. So don't let someone else's pace make you panic. Comparison steals confidence and ideally focus on your own progress. The reason why you guys are usually called into the anatomy lab prior to actually entering your marathon exams is to try and get you relaxed. But what do you guys do? Because you're geniuses, you start discussing things. And then you get someone who has read everything. You hadn't read everything. Then you start panicking, you start forgetting what you had actually prepared on. And then once you get in there, it becomes a massacre. So ideally, when you get into the exam, if you know you're someone who's like uh very easy to anxiety or panic, just don't talk to anyone. Just trust what you have been doing if you've actually been preparing. And if you haven't been preparing, then tough luck. I mean, whatever comes, whatever comes. If you weren't prepared well, I believe some of you have experienced it. Anatomy will hammer you seriously. But if you've actually been doing something about it, attending your classes and reading throughout, then you have nothing to fear. You just get into that place, compose yourself, get into the exam, and discharge your knowledge, the one that you actually have. So on the exam day, when you're in that examination room, trust your preparation. Don't change an answer just because it feels too easy. So ideally, which again I emphasize on, is your first instinct. In anatomy, most of the times your first instinct is like in 8 out of 10 situations or scenarios, your first instinct is always right. So you don't ideally need to be second guessing the choice that you already took. And that is bearing in mind that you have actually been preparing. So if you prepared quite well, if you prepared quite well, then that first instant, the first answer that you actually wrote, trust you me, that's in 8 out of 9, 8 out of 10 scenarios, that's the correct answer. So most of the times, like 80% of the times, your answer will be correct. Because sometimes you get when you're marking, someone wrote an answer, they canceled it out, and then they didn't cancel it out quite clearly. Then you get to read, and then you're like, oh my God, this guy got the correct answer. They crossed it out, they wrote an entirely or a very wrong answer, and then it becomes something else. You start beating yourself about it. So trust your preparation, ideally. Then, most importantly, look after yourself. So, burnout doesn't make you smarter. Taking care of yourself is part of preparing for exams. So, eat properly. I won't really talk about much about eating properly, but ideally, just be healthy. Stay hydrated, move your body, take exercises. Like in the middle of your breaks, as you're reading, just go walk around the library or your home, or just make your body active. So, the endorphins actually work pretty well with memory retention. Then if you feel you're overwhelmed, talk it out. You can reach out to your friends, reach out to your peers, you can reach out to us, your mentors who have already been through that. And if you try and reduce this sensation of of being overwhelmed, and just know you're not alone in this. We have been through that and we survived. So if we did it, you guys can definitely do it. And my belief is in you guys, so I hope you also believe in yourself. And I know you guys will pass, and you will make us proud, you make yourselves proud, and that's what matters. So, and lastly, I think this is my last slide. Prepare, pray, and perform. So, ideally, prayers work best to calm you down if you've actually been preparing yourself. So, prepare as though everything depends on your effort. Like, use the fear of staying behind, like as your friends are progressing into the second year, to motivate you to actually give it your all. So, pray as though everything depends on God. Faith should never replace preparation. You can't just be praying, and you haven't been reading. Trust you me, you're setting up yourself for failure. But ideally, if you've been preparing, the prayer will actually give you that calmness and confidence to perform at your best. So study a little every day, and by a little, I mean at least 6 hours a day. Focus on what you do not know, that is your weaknesses. Sleep well and trust yourself. So rest. And then walk in believing you have done your best. And what that which you want, which is going to second year, believe that you can actually do it and make it, because the first step that you already did was making it into medical school. So why not progress into the next years? So you have earned your place here, and with discipline, consistency, and God's grace, you'll make it through. And I think that's my last slide. Yeah, it is. So thank you guys, and I open the floor up to questions. I hope I didn't lose anyone along the way.
I don't think so, you did. That was a very, very entertaining and informative session. So the students had questions, in fact. So I'm gonna start, passing the questions to you, Andrew. So people have this problem of managing time, especially when it's specimen anatomy. How do you go about that?
Okay, just to clarify, are we managing time during the exam or actually managing time as you're revising?
Managing time during the exam. Remember, we have 1.5 minutes to actually do the question, maybe look
Okay.
at the, yeah.
So, uh, just to break this bubble, ideally, when I was in first year, that is 2022, we used to have 45 seconds for a question. So you can sort of see that disparity between us and you guys. You guys have 45 seconds, much more. And that is not to like throw your question under the bus or disregard it entirely. So what I am actually okay, what I mean is this: if you have been preparing yourself quite well throughout going through images and coming to the labs, then that 1 minute 30 seconds ideally shouldn't be a bother to you as such. The most important thing you should actually look forward to is once that bell rings, move to the next question that is yours. Sawa sawa. And try as much as possible to remain as relaxed as you possibly can be, so that you try and look at the question or the specimen with a clear mind. Because if you start jumping like you're moving to the next question in a rush, you're not settled, then that means that you'll be sort of answering that question with a foggy mind, you see, and that will actually have some repercussions for you. Two, I believe at this particular point, some of you have actually tried writing notes as your lecturers are as you are attending your lectures, and it's not an easy task. So, with that in mind, I believe at this particular point, each and every one of you should be a fast writer. The handwriting don't care really much about it, but just make sure you write eligibly for your end of year examinations so that you don't give the marker a difficult time. But be a fast writer, and most importantly, compose yourself and relax as you're moving to the next question. Don't panic and start answering question one at 20's place, and then at the end of the exam, you're telling us, "Oh, I panicked. I started answering from question 20 while I was in question one." And you see, for end of years, you won't get that benefit of like requesting for your paper to be considered. So bear that in mind, by the way, especially those of you who are fond of mixing up your numbers. So try as much as possible and relax. You've already done marathons for cut one, cut two, cut three. So at this point, no one can say they are not used to it. So relax, compose yourself. You have been preparing, and just do the exam. So take the shortest possible time to move to the next question. Answer whatever it is that you can. Maximize your marks. So if a question is asking you for 5 marks, if you're not completely sure, try and get at least 3 out of 5 that you're sure of it. If you can't get 5 out of 5, even better for you. I think that's what I would say for that question.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Another question. In biochem, do they test in depth like symptoms of diseases or alcohol metabolism?
Okay, so for that question, I don't want to completely disregard biochemistry because setting has been changing continuously throughout the years. Remember, I was in first year 4 years ago, so I can't entirely use my end of year examinations to help you prepare for yours because things have been different, considering you guys have been having a lot of physical classes. So, but ideally, they wouldn't go in depth, but it would be good just for you to be familiar with all those diseases, those metabolic disorders, those what are they called? This group of diseases with like Pompe's and Gauchers and Tay Sachs, all those. Just be familiar with them and what actually leads to them. Like if you are asked to maybe describe the biochemical basis of a given disease, of Gaucher's disease, you should be at least able to answer that. Same way with how you answer, describe the anatomical basis of a given congenital anomaly. So just be familiar with them and use your lectures to guide your revision. So, and that will pretty much work in your favor.
Okay, thank you. The next question. I heard supplementary exams are impossible to pass. Is that true?
Okay, so nothing is actually impossible to pass. And at this point, you guys haven't even done your end of year. So I don't know why you guys are thinking about supplementaries, unless you're setting up yourself for failure, which is a very dangerous position for you to be in. Supplementaries are not hard to pass. They just meant something came up with your preparations and you were not adequately prepared. But it doesn't mean that you didn't try. That's how. So at this point, I don't think you guys should be putting the question of supplementaries into your heads or your minds rather. So prepare for the end of years and go into them believing that you will pass. If not, take it as a learning stone, a learning step rather, and prepare for the supplementaries adequately. That is in case you get them. But I do believe all of you will actually get into this next year without this supplementary nonsense. So don't think about supplementaries. And in case you get them, it's a learning stone, learning step. Prepare for them adequately. Awesome. And they're not hard, but I can't really know for sure. But they're not. I do believe they're not because I have friends who have done them and they passed. So why not you?
Thank you, Andrew. We also hope that we all pass without supplementaries. Another question, what techniques work best for preparing for end of year? And when is it too late to make a save?
I actually don't believe in it being too late to make a save. You can actually make a save even the day of the exam. It just depends on you as a person and what you actually have, what you have to lose. Like for me, I think in first year, my biggest fear was like failing in these other units. I didn't have a much of a problem in anatomy as such. It was my strength. So my fear was actually in physiology to a much greater detail compared to biochemistry. So I think I really put a lot of effort into those because I was like, now if I fail this one, that means it's either I get a supplementary, which is not that bad, or a retake. And I'm not saying this to mean that retakes are necessarily bad, but I was just thinking of it in the sense of like imagining my friends moving on to the next years and leaving me behind. So I think that feeling of being left out behind was a very powerful motivator. So it's never too late to actually save a year. And for the techniques, I think I have shared those throughout this whole presentation. Read to understand. If you're not reading to understand, then if you are a crammer, then just cram everything. Because you see now crammers you just have to cram everything because you don't know what they'll say. But for those who are reading to understand, ideally, you're preparing for any sort of scenario. So you just apply your anatomical knowledge, your biochemical knowledge, your physiological knowledge, your behavioral science to be able to tackle that question. So that's how. So I think most of the presentation went through the technique, so I can't really add on too much on that.
Okay, thank you so much, Andrew. Now, for the final questions, what are mistakes commonly done by med students that end up being harmful later?
Uh, so I think one of the biggest mistakes you can actually make is taking everything all at once. You want to read everything all at once. That is one of the biggest mistakes. And that will actually lead to burnout. And you see, burnout is one of the most difficult things you may have to go through, especially in medical school, because the time it takes for you to recover from burnout, someone else will be already putting in the effort for the end of years while you're there recovering. So you're actually left behind. That's one. Two, uh, taking it as a joke, which I think I have seen for most of you guys, especially in first year, the assumption that like you're actually brilliant. You guys, as you're coming in, you're like, okay, I'm smart, yada yada yada, I can do this. And then you start trying to behave a certain type of way, especially in medical school. And let me tell you guys, itawaramba. And I think some of you have actually have experienced throughout the cards how misbehaving or lacking that discipline to actually study, how it actually reciprocates into your cards. So one thing I think we were told in first year as we were joining was like, all of you are smart. So try and think of it as like how you were in high school. Even amongst the smartest, there's someone who is smarter, who is at the top. And there's another one who is like at the bottom of this smart lot. So quote unquote, kuna chopi wa machopi, na pia kuna danda wa machopi. I don't know if you guys can relate to that. So uh, go there knowing that you're going there to learn and you actually don't know anything. So have the grace to learn. That's how. If you don't know something, ask a friend, ask the teachers, ask whoever. Sasa, have the grace to learn. That's the most important thing. Being like that egoistic, quote unquote, and being like, you think you can actually do it by yourself, and then you start misbehaving academically. Trust you me, that is just a recipe for disaster. So I think those two things, taking everything at once and not having the grace to learn, those I think are the two biggest mistakes you can make in medical school. Medicine is always a learning experience, so you need to be willing to learn. If you're not willing to learn, then I don't know what you guys are doing here. That's a recipe for disaster, ideally.
Okay, thank you, Andrew, for the final question. So this is not a student from UON, but they have their end of year exams in like 3 weeks, and the lecturer hasn't gone through a topic in anatomy that might much likely be tested. Like, should they take it upon themselves to cover it? Yeah, and in embryology, personally, he is really behind.
So, uh, okay, I'll answer this based on how UN anatomy is structured for first years. Ideally, you guys, I think for you guys in UN, you have noticed that you usually learn the week's objectives at the end of the week. I think you have noticed that, meaning that most of the anatomy you end up reading by yourself so that you can go into the lab, further appreciate it. Similarly to histology, histology is the only one that at least you learn it a week prior, but at least for histology, you have demos to come and actually show you what you should ideally be seeing. But for gross anatomy, you learn the week's objectives at the end of the week, which means if the lectures were supposedly supposed to stop teaching at the end of the week's objectives would still be accomplished, meaning you learned it by yourself. So if your lecturers haven't covered everything, get resources that can actually help you read it much simpler. Use your internet objectively. You have all these sorts of AI and everything. You can load a textbook into AI and have it give you a summary about a given topic. Use YouTube videos. Use anything to learn. Discuss with your friends. Have a discussion timetable. This day will be discussing this and that. You don't actually need the lecturers to teach you because ideally, even if they don't teach, they'll set and you won't question them. So, bearing that in mind, it just falls back to you to actually read by yourself. So these 3 weeks are actually that's pretty much enough time. You can actually cover almost everything, if not everything, and get into that exam fully prepared and pass.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. So we are coming to the end of our time. So, Andrew, before we close, do you have one final piece of advice for like first years heading into the end of years?
My final piece of advice that I will give you all is compose yourself and relax. And by relaxing, I don't mean stop reading. Read, but by the time you're getting to your exams, be sure that you have actually prepared adequately enough to go into that exam. Pray and just trust yourself into doing the exam. And I'm very sure, I'm positively sure, with all that in mind, you'll actually pass. There's nothing stopping you from passing. That's all. So just relax, especially while in the exam. Compose yourself and relax. Don't start panicking and being anxious. Panicking and anxiety, as Dr. Munguti usually phrases it, are signs of inadequate preparation. So if you find yourself becoming anxious, just know you didn't prepare actually quite well. You're wasting a lot of time. So if you know you actually prepared quite well, then go into the exam doing it. Don't compare yourself to anyone. You see, I've actually remembered something. Dr. Ngwazi in first year used to tell us there are 80 students, actually there are 90 students, there are 80 students, there are 70 students, there are 60 students, and there are bare minimum students. So at this particular point with all those three cards, I'm pretty sure you know where you stand. So if you're a bare minimum guy, don't go into an exam expecting to get a 90. You go into that exam expecting that 51. knowing that it will take you to second year. If you're a 60 student, get that 60 of yours. If you're a 70 and 80 and 90 students, get your corresponding marks. So, I'm pretty sure at this point you know where you stand. You don't have to have over expectations of yourself. And these over expectations are the ones that actually kill the dream. So compose yourself, relax, don't compare yourself to anyone, and know where you stand and actually work for it. And pray, my guys, pray. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much, Andrew. That was an incredible session. It was very helpful. I would like to introduce the founding CEO of Mastermind Medic Solution before we actually end the session. So, Emmanuel Wandera, the floor is yours.
Hi guys, I hope I'm audible enough. Can you guys hear me?
Yes,
Yes, we
yes, you're
can.
audible.
Okay. So I'll take a few minutes, just like two, three, before you close the meeting. Yeah, first, as Valerie has introduced me, I'm Emmanuel Wandera. I'm a fourth year medical student, a BSc Physiology graduate, and I'm the founder, as she has said, of Mastermind and the director of this particular program for exam mentorship. Yeah, so why I decided to come up with this program is because mentorship is core to like success in medical school. If there's one thing I want to tell you guys is don't do med school alone. And that's why you see us organizing such sessions. We had one for metabolism when you're starting, and then this one for endovia. And it's because we've seen them work before. They help us, and we've seen them help other people. So the few things you get to hear hapa na pale from Andrew, from your friends, from your discussion, they go a long way in helping you like cope, seeing you're not alone. Just like picking up golden tips, if I call them that way. So, yeah, my message is that don't do medical school alone. Have a group of close friends, have a discussion group. Yeah, in first year, you might not have really found a good grounding, but as you proceed, things tend to get better. You get to know like better coping mechanism. You get to understand yourself. Now, to somebody who is feeling overwhelmed, maybe you failed your cards. Don't worry. There are people who have salvaged themselves with end of year because end of year is 70% and then cards are 30. So if you actually like do your best in your end of year, you will proceed to this next class. And then if worse comes to us, you will get a supplementary and do and pass. So like just don't give up and do the best you can. Yeah. If you've been able to walk all the way from September to this point, and then you can do it. So I won't speak further. Just want to really thank Andrew and Valerie. You've really made this session a success. And to everyone who has attended, if your friend wasn't here, share with them what you've learned. And that's how we do it in medical school. Like pull your friends, and your friends will also pull you. Sawa sawa. So just to close is to wish you all the best in exams and to ask you in Mastermind we have quite a number of things we do. We have our media channels and our Mastermind Medics TV, where you can also like get a lot of valuable contents there, updates on opportunities, and other like relevant updates, because what we do is we tend to filter out the noise and then present to you things that are relevant to you as a medical student. So if you haven't heard of us or followed our channels, we have WhatsApp channels, we are on Instagram, YouTube, and even TikTok. We also have a medical supplies subsidiary where we focus on providing medical students with quality and affordable medical supplies, just to make your life easier here in school, and also to save your pocket money. Yeah, and as we continue engaging us, continue following our programs, and then yeah, the best we can, we'll always be presenting it to you. So I want to wish you guys all the best and have a good night. Let me hand back the mic to Valerie to close.
Thank you, Emmanuel Ondera. That was a very insightful word from you. So, yeah, we have a group for cracking first year, end of year exams. So, stay active in the group for daily quizzes, mnemonics, and evening sessions running all through this week. And keep an eye out for Kahoot Challenge night with prizes. This has been Cracking Year 1 End of Year Exams under the Mastermind Exam Mentorship Series 1.0. Good night, everyone. This recording will be shared, so go well, study smart, and remember, you're not doing this alone. So, good night, everyone.